Right, so getting into the meat of today's video, let's talk about Tower Unite. Tower Unite is kind of one of those small cult fanbase type games that is directed at a very specific minority demographic within the wider PC gaming user base. A game from a genre so underpopulated, one could almost be forgiven for thinking that it was extinct. I am of course talking about the open world social hub gaming genre. Tower Unite, to put it bluntly, was designed as a love letter, essentially, to PlayStation Home, but modernized and reworked in certain areas to make it stand out somewhat on its own merits. Tower Unite launched initially back in April 2016, but the game now finally being fairly close to its version 1.0 launch, with the newest update being marked as version 0.9.05, I think it's more than fair to critique it as a whole product at this point. Tower Unite, according to the developer, is the spiritual successor to the original community mod Gmod Tower, designed, as you may have inferred from the name alone, for Garry's mod. Originally released at the end of 2006 and continuing to operate on its community servers for almost a full decade, until closing in April 2016 to relaunch on Steam as the fully independent standalone game now known as Tower Unite. Tower Unite, as previously mentioned, is designed from the ground up as a casual, sandbox-esque online multiplayer game, where players spawn on an island full of minigames and activities. Now, before I go any farther, it's worth noting that I had upset some of the hardcore, I guess you could call them, Tower Unite fans on Steam and Discord by referring to some of the in-game social activities as minigames, but functionally from a game design perspective, they are minigames. I'll get into why later, but I just want it out there that I'm referring to them as such intentionally, not accidentally. Now, with that rather pointless disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about the actual gameplay, shall we? Tower Unite, kind of like games like TF2 in its earlier days, has a main menu that feels like something pulled out of the mid-2000s. In order to jump into the main social hub for the first time, you need to first open the server browser, then manually select the server you want to join. Tower Unite servers by default can hold a maximum of 64 simultaneous players, which isn't bad, but for a socially driven game, it's definitely a bit on the smaller scale size. I kind of wish the number of official game servers per region was lowered and the maximum occupancy count on each remaining server raised. Personally, I'd cap off the player count at roughly 99 or 100, because speaking as someone who's played on completely full or nearly completely full Tower United servers, the world even at max capacity feels way too sparsely populated. I don't think the average daily active player base count the game currently has would justify an enormous server capacity expansion like, say, 200 or 250 player slots per server, but it's hard to justify yourself as a socially driven game when even during the game's most active hours there's barely a dozen ongoing minigame matches, and most of your hub world activities are nearly completely deserted. One feature I do appreciate in Tower United, and in hindsight it should be a requirement for any similar online sandbox social hub game, is mod support. Specifically Steam Workshop modding support. Tower Unite allows players to alter their appearance and likewise see the custom appearances of other players, which is a pretty cool and fitting feature. Most games settle for just that first step of allowing the user to alter their appearance, but Tower Unite taking the extra step of allowing people to see each other's modded appearances is pretty cool. Speaking of which, this allowed me to finally fulfill the childhood dream I never knew I had, role-playing as Hagrid. Nothing like playing Tower United as Hagrid while your friend is beside you playing as Tom Nook from Animal Crossing.
I'm better than everyone else. I'm pure blood. Get out of my house!
Now, when the player first loads into the world, they'll spawn into an underground subway terminal. The first thing you'll likely notice here is the staggering amount of initial lag as the world loads in around you. To be fair to the game, when you boot it up on Steam, it does pop up with a disclaimer screen saying that the game is still in progress, it's still in development, and that this lag and other optimization issues present are being actively worked on, and will hopefully, when the game is complete, no longer be an issue. Still, you would think after almost 4 years of being in early access, this constant problem would have been addressed in some capacity, but apparently not. To leave the initial subway station spawn room, you the player walk up an escalator into the main tower, the one tower to rule them all, the tower that the game is quite literally named for. Now sadly, the tower itself doesn't really provide that much to do aside from allowing you to access your residential quarters, more on that later, or visit the rooftop. Hopefully in the future the tower itself will provide some more interesting features, but at the present moment it mainly fulfills the role of being a bridge between you and the main attraction, the plaza. The main town square area of the plaza is filled with a number of buildings, each of which contains at least one communal activity. However, as of the time of recording, a handful of said buildings are inaccessible to enter, and act merely as placeholders for future content. For example, one of these placeholder buildings has a sign in front of it declaring it to be the future destination of an in-game nightclub. Speaking as someone with a long history of playing on casual trade servers and social servers in TF2 and Garry's mod, I personally would love to see a nightclub added to the game, especially if I can get my character super drunk. Nothing says I don't give a damn like dancing the conga in-game on the disco floor while your character is simultaneously vomiting on everyone else in range. Yeah, kind of an odd fantasy to have, but hey, I have my moments. Now, with that lovely image planted firmly in your mind, a couple of the buildings that have been added to the game include a bowling alley, where players can bowl either solo or against a friend, a roller coaster, where players can sit together in rows of two, and go for a admittedly janky but still fun ride, and, courtesy of the game's most recent major update a month ago, a multi-floored, fully functioning arcade, one that almost manages to dwarf your average Dave & Buster's restaurant in terms of mere size. As you might imagine, I do have quite a bit to say about the arcade in particular, though I'll save that for a bit later in the video. While the main square does attract most of the attention, there is still quite a lot to appreciate on the island. In a way, the design does remind me strangely of the island from Wii Sports Resort. Now, like most family households from 2007 to 2012, I had a Nintendo Wii, and probably one of my favorite Nintendo-branded games for it, aside from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, of course, because Brawl is awesome. I don't care who disses Brawl in favor of Melee, but Brawl is still awesome, was Wii Sports Resort. If you're familiar with Wii Sports Resort, you probably remember one of the dozen-odd featured game modes was this little airplane flying simulation game mode, where you'd control this little bipedal plane and just be completely free to just roam the island. One of the only notable objectives in this mode was to collect these weird little secret collectibles scattered around the map, and they'd be hidden in all these bizarre locations, including one requiring you to very accurately fly down the main vent of a volcano. Over time, you become more familiar with the world and all its odd, eccentric details, and be rewarded accordingly for your exploration. Tower United is very similar, although it does lack a flying game mode, though hey, there's still time. While I doubt most players would think to leave the main square since all the core attractions are located literally side by side in that specific area, and due to the very closed-in world design the developers opted for, making the main square feel like the courtyard of a college campus, if you're of a more rebellious and curious nature like myself, you'll find that there can be a lot to enjoy if you venture off the beaten path. Notably, 2 theme park minigames, a Ferris wheel, and the previously mentioned roller coaster. There's also a pretty stylish water slide, however it's all for show as you can't actually ride down it or interact with it in any notable way. There are also small public beach houses which you can walk in on, dance on the disco floor, and flop down with a friend on a couch and watch YouTube videos on the in-game widescreen TV. And you also have the lighthouse, which you can enter and be transported instantly to the top where you can look down on nearly the entire island. However fun as these various sites are to explore the first time around, it does get pretty boring over time. It's made very clear that the developers wanted to make the island fairly large. However, they haven't managed as of yet to make it feel alive or even fully populated. And I'm not even talking about players here, that's a different issue I've already addressed. There's a fishing pond on top of the game's largest hill, which even has a sign encouraging players to go fishing, but there's no actual fish in the pond, so don't know why that is. There's this massive public pool, but there's no water-based minigames or activities. The small beach houses are nice, but since all the players start off with access to their own in-game apartment, the existence of public beach houses in the world just feels redundant, and as a result, no one uses them. Like, no one, at all. And let's not even get into how the developers market this game as a theme park simulator. Up until the latest update, which introduced the arcade, players didn't even have any main communal area to play games side by side. All you had for the most part was a bowling alley, 1 roller coaster, a few stores to shop in, a movie theater, and an apartment complex. Now, speaking as someone who as a kid lived within half an hour driving distance of Six Flags and would go up with his dad like twice a month during the summer, I have a lot of memories of being in an actual theme park. And Tower United, for all its claims to the contrary, is not a theme park simulation. It's quite possible, given another 4 years of time spent in early access, this might change, but as of the time of recording, I'm not holding out too much hope on this small dev team fulfilling that lofty promise anytime soon. That said, now that you have an idea of the rough outline of the island, let's go into a bit more detail on the actual attractions. Since I spent quite a bit of time already talking about the main town square, I'm going to start with the tower and the small stores bordering it. As I previously mentioned, the player, by accessing the elevator, can access their own personal virtual apartment, which they can customize using a limited number of tools, and as if to completely oppose this aforementioned limitation, can also utilize a seemingly limitless number of store-bought cosmetics and virtual items. Players can spend in-game money to acquire items to decorate their homes however they wish. The currency cannot be bought, and it has to be acquired exclusively by participating in specific minigames and communal activities. Over time, players can build up enough currency to buy bigger and more elaborate homes, as well as spend their money on whatever else they'd like in the game, because trust me, for as few ways there may be to earn in-game currency, there is an incredibly vast amount of ways to spend that currency. In effect, Tower United, like Grand Theft Auto Online, I suppose, is a incredibly on-the-nose capitalism simulator. It's hard to earn money, but it's very, very easy to spend it. If you plan to spend any real time elaborately customizing your virtual living space, or are looking to buy a new one, you're going to be spending some time in the stores. These stores are fairly small in size, and each occupied by a single NPC. Clicking E to interact with these NPCs will bring up a rather bland-looking menu of store items. The UI of these store menus leave a lot to be desired, although the developers have announced that more elaborate interactive store interfaces are on the way, so it's very possible you could see this change in the near future. It's also worth noting that buying an item is not the same as unlocking an item. Buying an item does not also include an unlimited supply of that item, but merely a single of that item. So if you're buying a share or some other common household item you normally need multiple of, you'd actually manually need to buy more from the store. While players can physically visit stores, players can also open up a website-based interface at any time, which will open an external browser within the Steam overlay. After signing in with your Steam account, you can buy any in-game item from any of the stores all in one place. The only downside is that the game doesn't exactly make it clear how to access this menu, and the menu itself, again, leaves a lot to be desired. I don't know why the developers wanted to make these menus as complicated as the UI from Windows 95, but again, hopefully this will change in the future. Now that we've explored the more domestic side of things, there's one other area worth discussing in regards to money spending activities, and that is the arcade. The arcade is, without a doubt, visually, single-handedly the most impressive thing in the whole map, and there's certainly no shortage of games to play and interact within it. It more than holds up to its name. In addition to the main floor, there are several smaller additional floors, although I hesitate to refer to them as full floors, but more like one big floor split up into multiple medium-sized rooms, corridors, and walkways. The further you go up to the higher levels, the less there is to do. The amount of games grows sparser as you go, and many of the machines that are there are nothing more than temporary placeholder assets for future content. While the arcade certainly is impressive, it's made clear that the current iteration is merely only an initial, incomplete version of a much more densely populated version in the future. I don't say this as an inherent criticism, but rather just to convey that the arcade, as well as everything else in the map, may still be worked on and improved over time. And honestly, they need quite a bit of work over time. The minigames and the arcade are bound together in what is essentially a symbiotic relationship, where the player first earns currency from playing minigames and then spends that currency on buying tokens in the arcade entrance. These tokens can in turn be then spent on playing nearly any game currently available in the arcade. These arcade games will provide the player with a new currency, tickets, the amount of tickets being dependent both on the game in question and the player's skill at playing that particular game. These tickets can then be saved up and spent on acquiring certain cosmetic rewards from the in-game rewards desk in the center of the arcade. Now, it must be said that the time investment spent towards unlocking many of the individual rewards can be somewhat excessive. For example, me and my friend decided to make our decision to unlock the peanut butter and jelly sandwich backpack, which I believe at the time was priced at 14,000 tickets. We could have picked any item to unlock for it, but on a trip all the way up to Boston one year, we stopped at this antique shop and jokingly bought a matching pair of ridiculous Christmas tree ornaments. He got a rubber slice of bread with peanut butter spread on it, and I got myself the matching opposite piece of bread with grape jelly splattered on it. At the time of recording, I still have that piece of rubber bread hanging by its string on my wall. So we both dedicated ourselves to unlocking this stupid PB&J sandwich backpack. All in all, it took a little under 5 hours to unlock it. Personally, it does feel like the grind here is a little bit too excessive. Some people might say 5 to 6 hours to unlock one item is fairly common in most RPGs, but this is not a hardcore RPG. It's an online, casual, socially driven game. One shouldn't need to invest potentially hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours, to unlock the majority, not the entirety, but the majority of the in-game content. Some grind, that's perfectly fine. Too much grind, not so much. Now, there's one other interesting social area worth bringing up, and that's the cinema. There is a in-game public movie theater where a few dozen players at a time can go sit in movie theater seats and watch YouTube videos on an in-game silver screen. This cinema is likewise another improved version of a previously existing Garry's Mod map, which the developers of Tower United are reportedly credited for creating, a map appropriately titled Cinema. There are, however, two key differences between the original Garry's Mod version of the map and the newer Tower Unite edition, and both of these changes are sadly to the game's detriment. Firstly, the Tower Unite version is a lot smaller in size, containing only 2 theater rooms, compared to the original Garry's Mod version, which, to the best of my memory, had around a dozen, although the individual sizes of each room in the Gmod version varied, some of them being fairly large and some of them being on the smaller side. Secondly, as of the time of recording, unlike the Garry's Mod version, the Tower Unite cinema does not allow for private rooms. The game does feature a in-game stand where players presumably will be allowed to rent private rooms by the hour using in-game currency. However, this feature has not been officially added to the game yet, so the in-game room rental stand is merely a placeholder for now. What I liked about the original Garry's Mod Cinema server was not only did it allow private rooms, but that these rooms at the time were hidden, and not behind an in-game paywall, but literally hidden like Easter eggs in specific little-known areas on the map. One that I and my friends often hid in was located, I believe, under a trapdoor accessible via a rarely used corridor connected to the main lobby. These rooms were not locked and anyone could drop in or out at will, but so few casual newcomers really found these rooms, these small rooms became a treasured aspect of the map. It seems a pity that these kinds of secret areas aren't really present in the Tower United cinema, nor really anywhere else on the island. In all my 20 plus hours of wandering the island and playing minigames, I've only found one remote secret area. I'm not going to tell you where because I don't want to spoil it, but then again, it really doesn't have anything worth spoiling, because the secret hidden there is kind of stupid and pointless. Now, I've been saving this for the end because I'm fairly confident that this is where I might get into the most hot water. Time to talk about the minigames. There's around half a dozen of these and the quality of each one varies. Some of them look polished enough to be prototypes for full indie games, while others look like the kind of asset flips that bombard Steam like enemy dogfighters on a nearly daily basis. The only ones I personally liked was the minigolf one, where players, as you might expect, get to play minigolf on a variety of highly creatively styled maps, as well as Virus, which is a pretty straightforward PvP zombie infection game mode, where one player starts out as a zombie and then has about 90 seconds to try to infect other players into zombies. The match ends when either all players have been turned into zombies, or if players manage to survive until the time expires. The rest of the more terrible current modes include Ball Race, which basically looks like the world's ugliest Unity engine-made knockoff of Super Monkey Ball Racing. Then we have Zombie Massacre, an equally hideous, if not more hideous, and tedious top-down zombie shooter game, whose only redeeming factor seems to be the fairly vast amount of weapon pickups you can find by shooting zombies. Then you have Little Crusaders, a mode that almost never has any active players whatsoever, and as a minigame tends to walk the fine line between being fun and worthwhile, and being just a boring waste of time. It's more or less like some of the minigames in Mario Party. It's not bad, and can be sometimes quite fun the first few times you play it, but then you're going to get pretty sick of it the more you play it over time.
The dragons fucking died.
Well, yeah, it tends to do that when you hit the big blue button on its back end.
Are you colorblind? Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is blue. What the fuck do you mean, am I colorblind? It's blue, you dumbass.
I thought it was a different color.
It's blue. It's just sitting up there looking at us. Okay, well, that was a little disappointing.
Oh shit, I'm out of here. Fuck you. Eat them all.
I'm just eating. I ate like 4 people. I just hear the screams of my victims. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't address 2 fairly valid pieces of criticism others have made about the game. Firstly, the quality of the game via the Steam page screenshots and press kit screenshots available on the developer's website do not in any way represent the actual visual quality of the game itself. I hesitate to refer to it as inherently false marketing, but it's clear that the developers seem to have polished up the quote-unquote screenshots before putting them up on Steam. Even Disneyland Adventures had a better looking hub world than Tower Unite. As a matter of fact, comparing the hub world and minigame quality between the 2 games, Tower Unite almost makes me miss Disneyland Adventures. Almost, but not quite. As for my second piece of criticism, according to user-taken screenshots of Tower Unite's official Steam page store, the developers had at one point promised as part of their Steam Early Access product description that they would not, at any point during Early Access, be raising the retail price of the game. However, at some point during early access, the price suddenly increased from $14.99 to $19.99, and the sentence in the description promising no price increase was silently and inexplicably removed. After doing some research, I did find that the developer did go on to explain the price increase on their own private forums, but they never publicly made a statement on Steam clarifying the price increase. As someone who believes strongly in transparency in gaming, especially when we're talking about an incomplete early access title, the concept of doing this, making a promise and then going back on it, without explanation to anyone other than your diehard users on your own private non-Steam forum, this seems like a rather sleazy thing to do. At the end of the day, it may sound like I'm just taking a hammer to the game and its developers, but I really do like the game. It has a lot of promising features and mechanics, but for every good thing they do, it seems like there's always something missing that could have made it better. If the developers, for some inexplicable reason, watched this video, not that I imagine they ever would, I would just ask them, before you add yet another minigame to divide up the community, please spend some time fleshing out your actual hub world, and cut back on the amount of servers and instead increase the maximum player cap per server, to make this social hub game actually feel populated instead of a ghost town, because right now a ghost town is exactly what it feels like. Well, this has been a rather long video, and I have no intention of drawing it out unnecessarily. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live. I upload roughly every other week, so look forward to a new review video coming your way pretty soon. As always, tell me what you think of Tower Unite in the comments below. I usually respond to every comment on the channel as soon as I can, so you can always reach me there if you want to. Everyone always seems surprised that I bother responding to comments, but hey, when you only get half a dozen to a dozen per video, it does make the whole process of responding to each one not only manageable, but usually fun as well. Before I go, I wanted to say thank you to those of you who have recently subscribed to the channel and helped me cross over 600 subscribers. It's hard to believe that in 2020 my channel has grown a third of its previous size. I started the year at about 400 subscribers, and here we are less than halfway into the year, and the number has already increased over 600. I knew this channel was capable of getting to this point, however I didn't expect to be crossing this milestone so quickly. Likewise, my channel recently crossed over 2,000 public watch hours in the past year, according to YouTube Analytics, up from roughly 700 hours this time last year. Me making longer videos has definitely helped, but the support I've received from those of you watching these videos is where the real credit lies. Thank you for helping me reach this achievement. I'm very grateful for your support, and I hope moving forward I'll continue to be worthy of it. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, and peace out.